Hello, I'm Constitutional Attorney Catherine Henry, and this is a continuation of our series on the Florida State Constitution, where we're going over the exact wording of the most important aspects of the Florida State Constitution. Again, not going through and reading every single word of the Florida State Constitution because it's about 6 times longer than the U.S. Constitution and would take us an eternity. But there are some sections that are just vital enough that you need to hear those words. And so we're going to continue going over those portions of the Constitution right now. Section 17, excessive punishments. Excessive fines, cruel and unusual punishment, attainder, forfeiture of estate, indefinite imprisonment, and unreasonable detention of witnesses are forbidden. The death penalty is an authorized punishment for capital crimes designated by the legislature. The prohibition against cruel or unusual punishment and the prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment shall be construed in conformity with decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court, which interprets the prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment provided in the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Any method of execution shall be allowed, unless prohibited by the United States Constitution. Methods of execution may be designated by the legislature, and a change in any method of execution may be applied retroactively. A sentence of death shall not be reduced on the basis that a method of execution is invalid. In any case in which an execution method is declared invalid, the death sentence shall remain in force until the sentence can be lawfully executed by any valid method. This section shall apply retroactively. Section 18, administrative penalties. No administrative agency, except the Department of Military Affairs, in an appropriately convened court-martial action as provided by law, shall impose a sentence of imprisonment, nor shall it impose any other penalty except as provided by law. Section 19, costs. No person charged with crime shall be compelled to pay costs before a judgment of conviction has become final. Section 20, treason. Treason against the state shall consist only in levying war against it, adhering to its enemies, or giving them aid and comfort, and no person shall be convicted of treason except on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. Section 21, access to courts. The court shall be open to every person for redress of any injury, and justice shall be administered without sale, denial, or delay. Section 22, trial by jury. The right of trial by jury shall be secure to all and remain inviolate. The qualifications and the number of jurors, not fewer than 6, shall be fixed by law. Section 23, right of privacy. Every natural person has the right to be let alone and free from governmental intrusion into the person's private life, except as otherwise provided herein. This section shall not be construed to limit the public's right of access to public records and meetings as provided by law. Section 24, access to public records and meetings. Subsection A. Every person has the right to inspect and copy any public record made or received in connection with the official business of any public body, officer, or employee of the state, or persons acting on their behalf, except with respect to records exempted pursuant to this section or specifically made confidential by this Constitution. This section specifically includes the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government and each agency or department created thereunder, counties, municipalities, and districts, and each constitutional officer, board, and commission, or entity created pursuant to law or this Constitution. Subsection B. All meetings of any collegial body of the executive branch of state government or of any collegial public body of a county, municipality, school district, or special district, at which official acts are to be taken or at which public business of such body is to be transacted or discussed, shall be open and noticed to the public, and meetings of the legislature shall be open and noticed as provided in Article 3, Section 4E, except with respect to meetings exempted pursuant to this section or specifically closed by this Constitution. Subsection C. This section shall be self-executing. The legislature, however, may provide by general law passed by 2/3 vote of each house for the exemption of records from the requirements of subsection A and the exemption of meetings from the requirements of subsection B, provided that such law shall state with specificity the public necessity justifying the exemption, and shall be no broader than necessary to accomplish the stated purpose of the law. The legislature shall enact laws governing the enforcement of this section, including the maintenance, control, destruction, disposal, and disposition of records made public by this section, except that each house of the legislature may adopt rules governing the enforcement of this section in relation to records of the legislative branch. Laws enacted pursuant to this subsection shall contain only exemptions from the requirements of subsections A or B and provisions governing the enforcement of this section, and shall relate to one subject. Subsection D. All laws that are in effect on July 1st, 1993 that limit public access to records or meetings shall remain in force, and such laws apply to records of the legislative and judicial branches until they are repealed. Rules of court that are in effect on the date of adoption of this section that limit access to records shall remain in effect until they are repealed. Section 25, Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. By general law, the legislature shall prescribe and adopt a taxpayer's Bill of Rights that, in clear and concise language, sets forth taxpayers' rights and responsibilities and government's responsibilities to deal fairly with taxpayers under the laws of this state. This section shall be effective July 1st, 1993. Section 26, Claimant's Right to Fair Compensation. Subsection A. Article 1, Section 26 is created to read, Claimant's right to fair compensation. In any medical liability claim involving a contingency fee, the claimant is entitled to receive no less than 70% of the first $250,000 in all damages received by the claimant, exclusive of reasonable and customary costs, whether received by judgment, settlement, or otherwise, and regardless of the number of defendants. The claimant is entitled to 90% of all damages in excess of $250,000, exclusive of reasonable and customary costs, and regardless of the number of defendants. This provision is self-executing and does not require implementing legislation. Subsection B. This amendment shall take effect on the day following approval by the voters. Section 27. Marriage defined. Inasmuch as marriage is the legal union of only one man and only one woman as husband and wife, no other legal union that is treated as marriage or the substantial equivalent thereof shall be valid or recognized. Section 28. Fishing, hunting, and the taking of fish and wildlife. Fishing, hunting, and the taking of fish and wildlife, including by the use of traditional methods, shall be preserved forever as a public right and preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife. This section does not limit the authority granted to the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission under Section 9 of Article 4.